Loading up Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots, and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad, oh baby's hella bad. After her there ain't no coming back. Wanna take a run at that. I think she's feeling me. Turn it up a few degrees. My imagination of her body gets the best of me. Oh gosh, she's such a tease. Bitten lips, bruised knees. I'm addicted to her, need her touching me. Cause she got a bad little waist, and we tearing down this place. Off the liquor that we chase. Casamigos to the face. Baby, I don't need no space. Coming closer for a taste, and I'll show you how I make everything just fade away. Cause she's like sex, drugs, cocaine, body so insane. Jealous of the clothing that she wears up on that tight frame. All game, no shame, baby came here to play. I feel like an addict cause she's sex, drugs, cocaine.
What's up dudes, and welcome back. Check it out, this video we're doing something a little different. I'm probably jumping the gun on what I should be doing. You saw the last video, we did a lot of suspension components, making things work, sway bars, end links, all that kind of thing. Dialing in the suspension, well, not dialing it in, but building it, setting it up, making it functional. Before that you saw shock mounts and everything else. So this part is straying from the path a little bit because now I'm sort of getting into body work a little bit. Not really on the body per se, but this is a part leading up to it. So what I'm doing here is making basically a rad support that's going to hold up my hood, my front fenders, the grille, the headlight buckets, all that fun stuff. But it's a little different from stock because if you've been following, you know that this is a rear radiator vehicle. The rad's mounted in the back. That's for basically for drifting purposes, for weight transfer, for balance, to give me a bit of room in the front. It's kind of showing off actually a little bit. It's not necessary, and it's probably performance-wise, I don't know if it's any better yet. We're gonna find out after I figure out all my pumps and everything else. But anyways, getting back into it. With the rad in the back, it gives me a whole lot of room up front. So this rad support is not gonna sit in stock position at all. In the previous video, I moved those end pieces. I cut off the front of the frame to make sure everything was all lined up and straight, both sides matched equally. Now that that's all done, this piece should work out pretty well. So it's gonna sit more forward. It's not gonna sit on the end of those. The end of those pieces I might actually cut off eventually or use for something else. But this bracket is gonna sit a little further back and gives me room to play. Now the advantage here is that because there's no radiator, there's all kinds of room to play. I can definitely set up some sort of oil coolers in the front if I need, some sort of air ducts where I can probably take care of the intake for the motor, get some air into that, get some air into the brakes if I need to, or anywhere else in the vehicle. It's kind of cool to have all these options, and it's kind of fun too because it's definitely a chance to be creative and just have fun with it. So I'm doing up these brackets very much like I made the brackets for the sway bars. I'm using the whole kind of technique again where I put a bolt and nut through it and then weld the nut on the opposite side. It gives me a fastening point that I don't have to worry about losing the nut. I don't have to worry about getting the 2 sets of wrenches in there. When I need to take it off, it's as simple as putting a socket onto like some sort of gun or whatever. You know, you can use a ratchet, but I mean, you can use power tools on it too. It's gonna be right there in your face. That's the whole idea. That's the, sorry, I had the brain stopped working for a second there. Couldn't figure out the right words. Getting into it. So now I have this piece built roughly how I want it. I'm gonna figure out where it mounts onto the frame of the truck. Now it's not gonna sit flat like this. I'm gonna throw a bend in it, and you're gonna see why later, but the mounts that are in the center are going to be for the front rad support, and when I put the bend in it, one of these brackets, one of these mounts is going to go down the side. That's going to give me a place to mount up my fender and make sure it's not flapping in the wind like crazy. And this is a 71 ElCamino. These front fenders, the hood, everything is absolutely massive. So I'm going to have to for sure get some lockdown points, some places to secure it, because if it takes off in the wind, it's going to be like a kite. It's probably going to go flying and take something out, or it's going to be bad. So here to get everything all locked in and make sure everything's cool. Of course, you got to clean it. It's a 71 ElCamino and it sat out. I'm pretty sure it sat in a mud puddle for a couple years before I got it because it was absolutely horrible. So you got to make sure that's good and clean and you can weld to it. Fortunately, I've been grinding, been cleaning, and that frame is still pretty solid, so that's not something too much of a worry. Again, this is it's not a collector car, that's for sure, so I'm not too worried about that anyway. It's going to get blasted probably and cleaned up real nice, real well. We're going to get rid of that rust, don't worry about it. But for now, you got to make sure everything's clean, your contact points. If you're welding onto rust or onto paint or something like that, you'll see it'll splatter, it'll pop, it'll make a bunch of it'll be bad. It won't make good contact, it won't get good penetration, it'll be a sloppy, dirty job. It's going to look like shit and it's going to probably fall off. So you're better off cleaning that stuff. Moving on, I put a tab onto the roll cage too because I wanted to try to triangulate this front bracket that I'm making. And that way it gives it some sort of strength forward and backwards too until I get everything else mounted on. I'm sure I'm gonna have to put additional brackets here and there on it, making sure it stays steady because it's gonna flop around a little bit. It's kind of like a tent sort of thing. So I wanna make sure that if I put some triangles in it, triangles are the strongest shape usually. So I think that's the way to go to make it all solid. Sorry for blabbering on so much, but I got a lot to say about this project and it's non-stop. So welding those pieces in. Now welding on the cage is nice because I just cleaned it and it's fresh tubing that I ordered. So that's always a pleasure. And once you get that really clean, you start welding good. If your machine is set in, it's very, very satisfying to lay down some nice solid welds. Moving on the front, this is the front piece. I'm gonna do the uprights in round tubing and I'm gonna do the top piece in the square tubing. Now the reason for this is pretty simple. The round tubing is basically to match the look of the tubing in the roll cage so everything kind of fits together really nice. And the reason I'm using the top piece as a square piece of tubing is that the square tubing is easier to fasten on brackets to make latches, to make mounts or any sort of thing. If I have to rubber mount something or if I want to put hood pins into it, it's way easier on a flat piece than it is on a round piece to drill through to make holes that you need to make. And also the flat piece is good. Since it's flat, it's easier to line up the height on top of the round piping. It's just a straight cut. I don't have to worry about any kind of throat lines beveled or shaving anything down to fit. And the other thing too is because it's flat, it's just the fenders, everything are just going to naturally sit on it and hang on it, which is going to make it very easy for me to set up how it's going to be built. Now, this piece is more, it's probably about the width of the hood or close to it, but it's not wide enough to catch the fenders, so I will have to make brackets on the side. But my measurements and everything, the way it's working out, I'm gonna have a little bit of play up and down on top. This bracket's not the exact height that I need right away. It's not gonna hit the perfect spot. So when I put the brackets on top, that should give me a chance to move things and have them set up and file them in really good where it's a nice height. The hood and the fenders will be all lined up. I'm probably gonna run hood pins in the front, which should make it pretty easy to space things out. You can always do a lot of work with hood pins if you have some sort of rubber underneath it that's gonna lift or lower it. But overall, structurally, I want it to be the less junk and gadgets have to be built possible and the less things in the way possible. The more solid it is with the less quote unquote bullshit in the way, the better. So here you can see I'm sort of setting it up. Now, I ended up actually making those pipes a little too far inset, but I'm gonna use that to my advantage later on. You're gonna have to stay tuned and watch more videos to see what I mean about that. But here I'm just gonna tack it in, make sure it sits right. It's a little tricky to do it all in one shot all by myself because you never know if you weld one side and it gets kind of hot, it sort of moves away from you a little bit. So you have to constantly check and check and check. So behind the scenes, when the camera's not running, I'm always measuring stuff and making sure everything's good to go and everything lines up properly just so that it's going to work out good in the end. And I'm not going to bore you guys with watching all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things that I just cut out in the editing. Probably with all the footage I have, I only use maybe 15% of it, which is kind of crazy, but you got to do what you got to do. A lot of the time when I get working on it, I get carried away and I stop paying attention to the camera and I forget that it's on, and sometimes it'll run for 20 minutes just recording, not much, not planned out. So here we're looking at it, the basic setup of the front. I'm gonna throw some welds on it, make sure it's a little more solid, make sure it's not gonna break, and when I take it off, make sure that when I do take it off, that it's gonna sit in the proper spot. Here it's all bolted and solid. So now if I do put some heat on it when I weld it and it starts to pull and push and warp, at least the bolting points are gonna keep it all in the same spot. So when it cools, it's gonna cool down into position. So thanks for watching that, guys. I know it was a little different than usual, but peace out. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. I'll see you next time.
It was hard to know. It was more crazy.